What in the world did I do? Welcome back to the channel, guys. Let's get straight into this. You're probably wondering what's going on with the chassis here, and you've seen the thumbnail, you've read the title. I did cut the chassis after having the entire chassis for my quote-unquote bagged K5 Blazer build here basically done. The only thing I needed left to do, like I mentioned in the last video, was replace these front servos. I wanted to put some stronger full-size servos up there. But while waiting for those servos to come in, which I'm still waiting on actually, I did a little bit more research on wheels and tires. It's something I hadn't covered yet. We were going to get to that in another video, but originally I picked up these tires. These are from Losi. They're used on the V100, I believe. They're 67 millimeters tall. I was gonna run a 28 millimeter wide in the front and a 30 millimeter wide in the back, which is why I have these plastic mock-up wheels printed. They're the same height, that way I could get my ride height set. But since the second these wheels came in and I looked at them up next to the body, I was a little concerned that they weren't gonna be the size I wanted. I wanted a nice size tire, a nice size wheel, not nothing outrageously big, but I wanted it to look pretty scale and I wanted it to fill up the fender really well. I know many of you guys have probably heard of him already, but I talked to Josh over at RC Everyday. He's done a couple of builds around this body before, and I saw the wheels and tires he used and I really liked the size. I asked him about his wheel and tire combo, and the tires he used were actually these Proline Inversion tires. These are about 3 1/4 inches tall. So a quick conversion, these at 67 millimeters are roughly about 2 5/8 tall, where these are 3 1/4. So you can see a pretty nice size difference there. I already put these up next to the body, and these really fill up the wheel wells compared to those old tires. So pretty happy about these. I'll still be creating my own wheels for this. I have some wheel designs in mind, but we'll get to that in its own video. The main issue with this was these tires being so much taller, I needed a little more clearance for the moving parts here. First of all, if you could hear in the background right now, I have the 3D printer printing up some new suspension components because these front arms needed to be longer, as well as my cantilever points up here. Doing the quick math on it, I believe that's about 5/8 of an inch of travel more that I needed using these bigger tires, and I wasn't getting that with these arms and this pivot point here. So I had to go in and modify those to make sure I had enough room for travel. In the rear, I thought we were going to be okay, maybe just having to update these rear cantilever pivots as well. But when I started looking at the 3D model, I realized I wasn't going to have enough room in my C-notch. And that's where the chassis cutting came in. I'll try to show the difference in the 3D model here, but to get this thing slammed on the ground with the chassis laying on the ground again, I needed to raise the C-notch about 3/10 of an inch. I didn't want to change a whole bunch of geometry though. I liked the way my suspension was set up. The wheelbase was perfect. I really just needed to move the top of that C-notch up, like I said, about 3/10 of an inch. So what I was able to do in the end was cut out just this vertical rail here and replace it with a longer one. That's why in the beginning of this video you saw the two rails bolted together. I cut the original rail out, cut the new ones, and tacked the first one in place. And then since I have all of these holes drilled already in the chassis, I wanted to make sure all of those were going to line up. So I bolted both frame rails together to be able to tack on the second one and weld them up completely, grind them, re-drill some new holes for all of my mounts, and we're hoping that this is going to work for us now. I came across an issue with that as well though. These cantilevers needed to be changed, as well as my wishbone. You might have seen in my original design for the wishbone that I had hollowed out a section on the bottom to clear the center of the axle when it slammed down. Well, now that we're moving up another almost 5/8 of an inch, I couldn't remove any more material and still have a wishbone. So I had to completely redesign that. I went with more of a tubular shape this time. Should give us a whole lot of clearance. Should be plenty strong, and it'll use some actual rod ends instead of just pressing the balls in the end. While those last couple parts finish printing, I'm gonna get the rest of the chassis pretty much mocked up back together. That way when those parts come off the printer, we can slap them on there. I'll print some more mock-up wheels and we can see how that'll work, make sure it lays flat. Hopefully by then those new servos will come in, and who knows, maybe in this video we can try everything out again. You just saw me put these new servos on the front. These are going to be my new lifting servos, and now they're off again. With the movement of these servos as well as the larger tires, there's some things we have to change, and today we're just going to do a quick mock-up because the parts didn't print as well as I wanted to. These are the new cantilever arms. You can see how rough this print is. The main thing is though this slotted hole at the bottom. We have to first install that using the same shouldered screw. And then our servo can be mounted back in place. You may already see where I'm going with this, but the actual central point where the servo moves and the central point where my cantilever arm moves isn't collinear or concentric, I guess. Which means the actual point where they connect will not stay in the same location throughout the movement of the servo. So I have a slotted hole here. I'm going to use the same screws I used before, but I'm using one of these little sleeves or collars that come with the servos. Normally they're used for mounting the servo, but for this, I'm sliding it inside of my slotted hole, and then it just threads into the servo arm just like before. That's a lot better. Hopefully you can see that pretty well on the video. You see the head of the bolt actually starts all the way up, and as my servo travels, it moves to the bottom, still moving my cantilever like it should, which will lift the truck up, pushing down on the shock, but we're not binding the cantilever or the servo anymore. For the rear, like I just mentioned, this last batch of parts I printed came out really bad. I wasn't sure if I needed to re-level the bed on my new printer or what, but hopefully the new prints will come out a little better. Still want to describe to you what I'm planning on doing here. One of you commented about a different type of servo that I hadn't actually thought of or really heard of before. I'm not too sure who it was. I'll try to drop the comment here. But instead of using those micro servos, I picked up this dual axis servo. Originally when I saw it, I thought that meant it's driven from both ends, but really there's just a free spinning wheel axis on this side, and this is the driven end of the servo, just like a normal servo. This will allow me to create a bracket that'll lift both rear arms at the same time. The bracket allows me to connect both sides of this servo together so that it'll lift together instead of having two separate servos, maybe one being misaligned a little bit, needing a little more trim. It'll all be on one servo. Everything should be perfectly in line, which means I had to make a whole new mount for back here, and this print as well, as you can see, turned out horrible. But to get an idea of it, this new tray will sit back here. The servo will sit on top of it with this hold down clamp holding it in place, and then this is another piece that I have to reprint. This will be my bracket. It'll connect these together, and then same two screws will run inside the bracket to my rear cantilever arms, and then this will lift up, lifting up the rear of the truck. This one's similar to how the front was, would almost need to be slotted holes on the bottom. There's one reason why I didn't do that. I'll try to show you in Fusion 360 here. when you zoom in, the difference between the travel pass of the cantilever and my new servo arm looks pretty big. But when I actually measure it, it's less than 1/10 of an inch. It's not that much of a difference, so I don't believe it'll bind too much. So before I go ahead and reprint these rear cantilever arms, I'm just gonna try it out once I get these parts printed. Hopefully this next batch of parts comes out a whole lot better. The main goal of this video though has been completed. We had to cut the rear end of the chassis to fit those new larger wheels and tires. And I think this is really gonna work out well. I'll have even more travel now. I should be able to get the truck off the ground a little higher for driving it around, and those wheels will look really good underneath there. This week, I want you guys' opinions on the wheels though. You'll see here I have 2 models of what I'm thinking of for a wheel design. Neither one is completely finished yet. There's still a couple finishing touches I need to put on them, but I'm curious what you guys think. Which wheel would you like to see? I have my kind of favorite pick already, but I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video. We're getting close to getting the body on this thing. Matter of fact, I'll probably finish up these suspension parts with those new 3D printed parts off camera, and the next video you see on this truck will be mounting the body. I have to figure out how to do that because the original body mounts won't work, but the plan is for the next time you see this chassis, it'll be covered with a body. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that video coming soon, hopefully in the next week or 2. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and as always, thanks again for watching. Peace.